Hello there. Today I'm going to talk about Ivan's childhood, the Andrei Tarkovsky film debut. Even though he'd made a shorter, 60-70 minute film before, this was like this big theatrical debut, the one that was got a lot of critical acclaim and basically put him onto the stage before he was doing student stuff. This was his first international release. This is his first acknowledged film. Is there this stuff is viewed as just like student stuff, really. So this is his first mature film, according to the critics. It's a film that Tarkovsky himself wasn't particularly keen on. He would look back on it and say it had some problems. And it wasn't the material he'd started with. It started off with a short story called Ivan that had been adapted. It's been a different director doing to start with, but that was developed and it fell apart. And then they gave it to Tarkovsky and he did his version of it. The Soviets approved his version, so they gave him the money to make the film, and it came out and became a big success. And the difficult thing about this film is you can just see, wow, it's brilliant, and then move on, because it's so obvious the work of someone with lots of talent, and it's a virtuoso filmmaking. But it is a kind of it is a strange one because it is Tarkovsky, but it's not. You do feel that I do get where he's coming from when he says when he more or less was kind of hinting that it wasn't entirely his. It wasn't a full Tarkovsky film, the same way as like Solaris or Stalker was. It does, because this first film, he does have pressures on him to there's no depressing voiceover that goes on and is very existentialist, and it looks at religion and faith and all that stuff. There's none of that here. And if you're a Tarkovsky fan, you can look forward to that. I mean, there's something really enjoyable sitting and listening to a Russian, basically moan for an hour and a half in a film. It's very soothing. Really, honestly it is. So there is that element that's not there. It's a much more smoother, more mainstream film in a sense that it's clear filmmaking. There's no... The introspection is cut down to minimum. Everything's done visually, or most of the stuff's done visually. It's a very clear film. It's a very understandable film in a way that's a lot easier to understand than even what would follow Andrei Tarkovsky or Solaris, which are more complicated films. This is a simpler film. It's simpler goals in mind. So I think maybe that's why Tarkovsky might not be as fond of it as a lot of other people. A lot of film directors loved this film, said it was a really amazing debut. Got a lot of praise, and Tarkovsky being Tarkovsky was probably grumbly about it. Because he's one of those directors who's just grumbly a lot. He's like Kieslowski. Great director, moans a lot. Because he's got high standards, and even if people think he reaches standards, he's at a higher standard in mind, so he will always be critical. So, and to be honest, when I'd seen this film before, and I kind of went along with Tarkovsky's assessment as well, it being his weakest film. I've seen it before on just on TV, and it's a very good film, but I never really warmed to it. I can recognise it's a great film, but I didn't really warm to it. I saw the projector this time, and it's far more impressive. I still prefer some of his later films, but it's a far more impressive film. It really is a really well-made film. So it's about a kid during the World War II on the Russian front, who's basically a scout. He's 12-year-old, his family's been killed during the war. He's a patriot for the war, for the Russian side of the war. He wants to kill the Jerrys, as he calls them, or help the army kill the Jerrys. He hates the Germans. They're trying to send him back to the military school, so he's going to be safe during the rest of the war, so he doesn't have to deal with the war. Because if he goes back to military school, he'll be safe, the war will be over, and he'll have his life. But he always threatens to run away, and does run away whenever they suggest they're going to do it. So he's got a kind of a family of similar soldiers who are all in his little group of people surviving in the front. There's a commander, there's a Captain Colin, who's a bit of a womanizer and who is more or less, even he suggests that everyone thinks he's a bit of an overgrown child. And there's a gruff sergeant, and they three can look after him and try and make sure he's okay. They also know he's a very good scout. He's really good at his job. He's a kind of kid you can send out and he'll survive in areas where normal soldiers would, because he's so small, he's hard to see, he's got survival instincts. He's really like a top level scout. But it's also, he's a kid. It's like, it's something immoral about what they're doing, but it's the more immoral. So there's that tension throughout the film. It's like, we're asking a kid to do something that we shouldn't be asking a kid to do, but he's so gung-ho about it, he will not take no for an answer. He feels that this is doing his job for his country. So he's a fanaticist against the Germans. He hates the Germans because they killed his family. So he's not going to stop doing what he's going to come running away and come back to the front. He wants to fight. And he gets angry if people get killed because they sent the wrong scouts. Because he'd rather be the scout himself and do it properly. And give them the warnings of where the Germans are so they don't send the soldiers in to get massacred. So that's basically set up. And it's not a film of great dramatic straightforward. It's about that little family, their dynamic, as well as that they've met up with another soldier who's the commander on the front, trying to deal with his own problems with his troops and trying to be a decent person. And he's his own problems. So when he encounters Ivan, he thinks, who is this kid? This kid's really hard to deal with, and he's really stubborn, and he just insists. He doesn't give anything away unless he's got these orders. He follows his orders, basically. He says, call this person here and they'll tell you who I am. He's no sentimentality at all. And you get the sense of this kid just blinkered to his cause. And this soldier, who's a patriot for his country to fight the Germans, is still kind of shocked. It's like, most people he meets aren't like that. Most people just try to survive the war. Even the soldiers in Ivan's group are just trying to survive the war. They're not like the same level of crazy that he is. And it takes him back. And because Ivan's going to operate out of that area, because that's where the front's going to be, he gets to know the Ivan plus the little group as well a bit more. And they get to know his people a little bit more. So there's the head of the nurses, who the commander's a soft spot for. She gets harassed by Colin, and you get to see the darker side of Colin. But it's not a fully vicious dark side. It's just like he managed to get a kiss from her, from a lot of manipulations, and but he knows he's going too far. And the commander knows that she's too sensitive for the front. She has to go back. She can deal with stuff in the cities, but not in the front. She's not built for that. And it's just a sense that people in the war are not the typical, are not basically like all soldiers. They're just people trying to survive a terrible situation. And that's what the film's good at, just this thing of humanising the Russians on this front, trying to survive against this faceless enemy you can never see. Which are the Germans, of course. And they're going through swamps and rivers and things like that. And it looks beautiful. It's all in black and white. It looks absolutely gorgeous. But it's about survival in war in different ways. And how no one's perfect. Everyone's got their flaws. Everyone's got their problems. And it's a very human approach to it. But it's not an intellectual approach. It's not like Tarkovsky, where we go much later about questioning existence and what it all means. There's none of that here. It's just a story about a kid in a war and the people he meets and their problems. And eventually, as the film goes on, people start to die during the war. And I won't go into the ending, even though it's an old film. A lot of people probably haven't seen it. But, I mean, it's a war story. You know, people are going to die. And it's about the Russian front. It's how they basically survive. And it's a very haunting film, because it's very simple storytelling. It makes his points and moves on, very carefully, and the details accumulate slowly. And when people die, it's affecting. It's because you've learned enough about them all, the good side and the bad side. So when people die, it really does get to you. So it's wonderfully done that way, and it does show you the price of war and the price of and how difficult it is to even be a soldier in this war. Like having to try and be a scout. Being a scout's terrifying. You can easily be killed. They have patrol. Germans have patrols along the front as well, so you have to avoid all the patrols. And just trying to survive these missions is very difficult. So it's a very complicated film about complicated people and how just the grunt work of trying to survive a war is. It's not just surviving the bullets, surviving the conditions, surviving the cold, the fear, the sense of lack of purpose, the sense of getting orders that you don't understand, the sense of dealing with people on your own side who are not very competent. It's just this sense of how difficult it is to survive a war. And that's what the film really delivers, because it's not like overly cynical the way like a Peckinpah film might be. It's much more like, this is tough, this is really tough to survive a war. It doesn't have the sentimentality of a Spielberg where it's Saving Private Ryan. It's just, this is tough. This is a horrible situation. It's very tough. You have to. It's not very fair to people. It's just like exhausting. And by the end of it, you're not going to know what you think. You're just going to be exhausted. So this is a wonderful film. I still think it's on the lower end of the Tarkovsky oeuvre, but it's a lot better to remember. It is very visual. It is very spare in its visuals, but it gets the point across all the time when the camera movements are wonderful without being overdone. Just the detail is wonderful throughout. But I do get what Tarkovsky thinks is like, it's a bit obvious at times. There's one or two instances you're thinking, we didn't need that. That feels obvious too. But it gets some point across about the war. But you'd think a later Tarkovsky would have found a different way to do certain things. Even though its professionalism is so good that the scenes are very affecting. Just when you look back on them, it's like, we didn't really need it. It's a good scene, but you didn't really need it. There's that kind of element to this film. For me, at least. Other people love this film. Which is like, to me, it's a very good film that had a couple of things in the middle. I think if they'd improved them, it would have been much stronger. But there's no way to really go into detail of what. It's just much more of a feeling of there might have been stuff in the story that they've adapted and that might not have translated, at least for me, is clearly into cinema. But that's just my opinion. I would definitely say you should watch this film. It's only 90 minutes, 100 minutes. It's not very long. It's pretty short for a Tarkovsky film. It gets to the point very quickly. And there's lots of terrific scenes. It's a really well directed film. And all the professionals are really good. I just think some of the storytelling, there's little beats here and there that I'm not quite sure about in the middle. It feels like the first third is really strong, and the final third is really strong. In the middle, there's a lot of good scenes, but I'm not sure if they're all, if there's other better scenes that could have been put in there. It's just that feeling I get from this film. It just feels like it's a film that's really well made, but in the actual storytelling in the middle, it feels like there's little bits and bobs that it could have been better. But that was my opinion. So I'm going back to Tarkovsky's season. I'm doing it pretty much randomly, like whenever I want to feel like watching, that's when I'll cover. I'm not trying to do it in order, like Roden sometimes does. He does do things in order. And I would never get through a series that way. I need to just do whatever film I feel like. It's just, that's the way I do it. So, if you enjoyed this video, I'll be back soon with some other ones. Bye for now.